Hello everyone, and welcome back to another Sensei series. Today we're looking at the building blocks of rhythm. This video should serve as foundational knowledge we can build on. I'd like to do some more complex rhythm stuff in the future, and it's important that we're on the same page. If you feel like you know this stuff, it never hurts to review, and if this is all new to you, don't rush it. Take some time and rewatch parts of the video that may confuse you. Here we go, let's dive in. What is rhythm? Google defines rhythm as a strong, regular, repeated pattern of movement or sound. In music, rhythm is the underlying pulse in a song, the beat that propels the music forward. Most can feel out the rhythm of a song without ever analyzing it. Compared to pitch, rhythm comes a little more naturally, because it's all around us, our heartbeat, the chugging of a train, the ticking of a clock. But it can also help to understand rhythm from a theoretical perspective for a number of reasons. It allows us to analyze how others use it so we can pick up things to use in our own music. It enables us to communicate concepts much easier with other musicians. We can also analyze our own rhythm and work to create more interest within it. At this point, I want to make a note. Different cultures and their music use rhythm in different ways. Going forward, the concepts we look at are going to apply more to the music that falls under the Western umbrella. So in music, there is an underlying steady pulse. This pulse repeats itself every bar or measure. We can notate these bars using bar lines. These bars will contain the same rhythmic feel, and for the majority of music, one would hear that pulse occur 4 times in a bar or 4 beats. We'll look into some times where this is not the case later. Let me demonstrate how we would count this 4-beat pulse over a couple songs. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The instruments aren't necessarily playing everything on that count of 4. Instead, they're playing around it while still being held together by it. Which brings me to notating rhythm. Now that we have the concept of the bar and the pulses within the bar, let's start breaking it down further. Altogether, those 4 pulses within the bar take up the full length of musical time within the measure. When looked at individually, each beat is 1/4 of the bar, which is why we call it a quarter note. If we played a note that encompassed the musical space of 2 quarter notes, it would be called a half note. 4 quarters is a whole note. We can also break down a quarter note into smaller segments. An 1/8 note is half as long as a quarter note, and a 16th note is half as long as that. Now we don't need to break down our groupings and even subdivisions, we can also use odd numbers. We can break down our quarter note into 3 notes called 1/8 note triplets. We can break down our half notes into 3s as well, called quarter note triplets. And a whole note would be broken down into half note triplets. We can also use 5-note subdivisions, 6-note subdivisions, and so on, but they're less common. Now and then we'll come across notes with a dot beside them. This means play a note that is 1.5 times the length of the initial rhythm. For example, let's look at a dotted half note. A half note is 2 quarter notes long. 2 quarters times 1.5 equals 3 quarter notes of length. Now keep in mind, we are not playing 3 quarter notes here. Rather, we're saying that a dotted half note takes up 3 quarter notes length of musical time. We can also connect 2 notes when it doesn't make sense to write a note of longer value. For example, when I have a 4-note pulse in a measure, I can't add any more time into that. So what if I want to write a note that's held out for 5 pulses? This note would be held over the bar line, and we tie 2 notes together using a tie. There's some standard conventions about when we would use a tie versus using a note of longer value, but we're not going to worry too much about that today. My last point on notation, when we're writing music, we also need to dictate silence. If a note isn't played, we keep track of that space using a rest. Here are the rhythmic values and the rests that correspond. When writing a song, we'll use countless different combinations of these note values as long as we stay within the time signature. Which brings us to our next section, time signatures. These are 2 numbers that give us information about our bar. Our most common time signature, as we mentioned before, is 4/4, also notated as C as in common time. The bottom number indicates which subdivision the pulse occurs on. The top number tells us how many of those notes are in a bar. In the case of 4/4, the pulse occurs on the quarter note, and there are 4 of them in the bar. Within the bar, there's a hierarchy among the emphasis of the beat. Some beats are more pronounced while some are weaker. In 4/4, the first beat is the strongest, followed by the third. The second and fourth are the same and the weakest of the downbeats. The offbeats are all the same emphasis and are weaker than the downbeats. The offbeats are often referred to as the and of the beat. Now this is the natural feel and expectation, but it doesn't mean we can't play around with this concept in our songs. Different styles can be defined by their unordinary emphasis of the beat. Take ska, for example, that has a lot of weight on the offbeat. That contrast with the expectation is what makes it cool. Of course, we can also have songs that have more or less than 4 pulses in a bar. We could have 3 quarter notes, 3/4 time, which is also commonly referred to as a waltz. Notice how the feel sways and just moves differently. We can also have a song with 5 quarter notes in a bar. This is fairly rare, though Dave Brubeck famously used it in his song Take 5. With 5/4, the emphasis can be felt in 2 different ways. The strong beats being the first and fourth, or the first and third. To avoid confusion, the desired metric pattern can be written like this, or like this, showing us where the emphasis lies. We can also see our beat given to the 8th note in a time signature like 7/8. Here there are 7 8th notes in the bar. Like our previous 5/4 time signature, the emphasis can be felt in different ways. And like 5/4, it can be notated as such. This is a fairly uncommon time signature, but it pops up now and then. It's worth noting that you don't necessarily need to stay in one time signature for an entire song. Take for example Pink Floyd's Money, which for the most part is in 7/4. However, when the guitar solo comes in, it kicks into 4/4 and drives the song home. An amazing musical twist if I do say so. The last thing I want to discuss with time signatures is why do we pick one or another when the end result would seemingly be the same? Why use 3/4 over 3/8 or 6/8? First, let's look at using 3/4 over 6/8. With 6/8, the implication is that there are 6 pulses. The first pulse has the most weight, the second and third have less. The fourth beat is stronger, but not quite as strong as the first. The fifth and sixth pulses are equally weak like the 2 and 3. The important distinction is that the fourth pulse is strong, but not as strong as the first. If we wanted the fourth pulse to be the same as the first, we would write it as 3/4. It's a very subtle difference. So moving on, why use 3/4 over 3/8? Now, I actually had to look this up because I don't think I've ever seen a song in 3/8. My understanding is that fundamentally, 3/4 and 3/8 feel the same. The reason 3/8 is uncommon is because of legibility. If I wrote a song in 3/8, the smallest subdivision of the beat is a 16th note. Having a song full of these is significantly harder to read than a song with quarter notes and 8th notes. This was the best answer I could find. There's some interesting musings on 3/4 versus 3/8. Feel free to Google it. I hope you guys are doing all right. Musical math can be a little bit overwhelming. Again, take your time with this. There isn't much more. We're in the home stretch. Tempo is the last thing we're diving into and probably the easiest to comprehend. It tells us how fast musical time is passing by. The idea of playing fast or slow leaves a lot of room for interpretation. We need some sort of metric to compare it against. What we do is compare our beat to the minute. A metronome or a click is a tool that can do that for us. It's usually assumed that when we see a tempo, the beat is given to the quarter note. For example, 100 beats per minute, 100 BPM would be counted as such. A quarter note every time the metronome triggers. This is not always the case. If the tempo was 100 beats per minute, with a half note getting the beat, it would sound like this. Alternatively, that could be notated as 200 beats per minute, where the quarter note gets the beat. And that's it. Those are the building blocks of rhythm. If you feel totally confident with this stuff, great, because now we can go and talk about how to use this information musically. If you're still a little bit hazy, don't be discouraged. Go back and rewatch the parts that are giving you trouble. A big thank you to everyone who supports my channel through Patreon. If you like what I do here, please consider clicking on that link and checking it out. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Samurai Guitarist, and I will see you again next time.